sleek it, cowering, timorous beastie. Oh, what a panic's in thy breastie. Thou need nae start away sae hasty, wee brickling brattle. I would be laith to rin and chase thee with murtering prattle. So it is Burns night, ladies and gentlemen, and we're doing things a little bit differently. I'm sort of taking the reins tonight. I'm Philip. I go by Doc Phil Platypus. You can find me in the lodge, and I'm joined tonight with by my usual co-hosts. I got to remember which direction to point. Uh, Demi Tastes or Doug, a host with a mouth for tasting as much for talking, and Joe O'Sullivan, who's a good friend of ours in the industry and a member of the lodge, and a fantastic guest to have tonight.
Oh, thank you very much, Phil. I've been working in the industry for a while. I'm a distiller. I worked at Clear Creek Distillery, Hood River Distillers, a few others, and I'm now at Minden Mill Distilling. But not here to talk business tonight. This is about hanging out with some friends. I can't wait to be on in a more professional manner. But if I spoil a couple of things, we'll see what happens.
I'm so glad I got to tempt you to join this.
Yeah, I mean, it was really hard.
Dying to talk to you again.
It's good to be on, guys. I miss y'all.
We miss you too.
Likewise.
So, I suppose we should very briefly. It's fairly common knowledge, but not everybody is aware of who Robert Burns or Rabbie Burns is, or rather was, and sort of the significance of Burns Night, which has morphed from kind of a very low-key thing to, for example, the British consulate in D.C. and various other places hold a Burns Supper, which is a celebration of the great poet and Scotch whiskey and Scottish culture in general. Every year on January 25th, the great poet's birthday. And it's a celebration, like I said, of Scottish culture and you know the reason why Robbie Burns is so important in Scotland is from a time period where there was a lot of sort of a the upwardly mobile were looking to France and other parts of Europe as sort of adoption of foreign cultures. There was sort of this growing discontentment amongst the working class in Scotland and Wales and Cornwall and England, and Robbie Burns sort of harnessed it in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way in many instances, sort of speaking to and creating art for the working class Scots, and really, instead of eschewing his past and his heritage, sort of embracing where he came from and the the hardworking people and farmers that he grew up around. And it has been pointed out that it is a little bit odd that, it's gone from being a celebration of the great Scottish poet and his connection to the working class to sort of a very highbrow affair. But, tradition evolves and morphs over time. Traditionally, a haggis is had with your Burns supper, which I've done a couple times. It's certainly different. Although, looking at Twitter recently, you might think that haggis is some small furry beast of the Highlands that needs to be chased down and caught in nets. Haggis is actually a rustic farmer's or peasant's food. Sorry, I can't see my quotes. Peasant food that is made from oats and offal, and it's OFFAL.
Yeah, don't bury the lead on that. What's awful?
I mean, many things are awful, Joe, but
no, but it's awful our guts, right? Sorry to interject, but I was just like, oh, that's too big.
Yeah.
The parts that
cast off parts.
Yeah, it might be apocryphal, but I feel like that's what hot dogs. That's what it's rumored hot dogs are made out of. all the cast
Yeah,
off parts,
pretty much.
the
At
ears, the
least
organs. Yeah.
historically. Um, Most of the well-known sausages and meat pies and the like are sort of in their essence a way of using up the leavings, the bits and pieces of animals that are consumed that aren't really appetizing to be
Mm.
consumed other ways. Um, Haggis isn't any better or worse than any of the others. It's just very Scottish, um, and often is prepared with a dash of blended Scotch thrown in. Um, and it's okay. It's like any other offal dish. It's kind of grainy, greasy, rich. Um, not to everyone's taste.
I've heard from friends that it tastes quite a bit like sausage, and
Yeah,
I've never appropriately tasted. Would never turn it down though. It sounds like kind of a good experience.
it it's very uh, very gamey. I
Yeah,
think.
my mom used to threaten me with the concept of haggis, but she also threatened me with the concept of kimchi, and that's delicious. So I'm saying that
Mhm.
haggis might be really not what people think it is.
Yeah. I have never had haggis. I've kind of been curious to try it. Uh, have it's just, I mean, it would have been too hard to get it today. I did think about it. I was like, wonder if I could find like a someone who sells it here. But I think there's something. Um, isn't it like lamb lungs or whatever is traditional in haggis, and that's like illegal in the United States?
So what's traditional in haggis is basically all the pretty much everything. Just whatever doesn't cut into nice, easy to sell cuts gets turned into gets chopped up or ground up and thrown into the haggis. So that includes all the internals, hearts, lungs, etc. Liver apparently.
Hmm.
Um,
And who wouldn't want
it
liver?
is. I
I
mean,
mean, I
it provides
personally,
lots of
I'm a big
iron and
fan of liver
minerals.
personally. Didn't mean for
Yeah.
that to be sarcastic.
No, I mean, uh, growing up, every once in a while, my grandmother would make chicken liver for us, which very gritty, irony, mineralic. Um, but haggis has a reputation for being much worse than it really is, and I think that that started out in jest of sort of a you know it wasn't really a one time on Burns night sort of thing. It was a general fare for the working sorts in Scotland for a long time. And history as it evolves and people grow to look back into the past and see the tradition or heritage in different ways, it changes the way it's perceived. So very frequently you find that dishes like haggis and similar things, blood pudding in Ireland, you know, have a reputation for being, truly awful, monstrous, disgusting things, and it's all into preparation. If you have good haggis, it'll be perfectly fine. And good is a subjective good here, but it's all in the spices, how it's prepared. Um, and because it was such a staple of working class cuisine in Scotland, is why Robbie Burns wrote the address to the haggis, which is used to introduce the haggis at Burns' suppers. Traditionally, there's an opening, and um, there it is. There is some pageantry involved. The most traditional forms typically the host gives a toast, and then one of the men gives a toast to the lassies, and one of the lassies gives a toast to the laddies, and then the haggis is piped in, and uh, the haggis is addressed by the host, who ceremoniously draws a dagger and cuts open the haggis, um, and then everyone. I think traditionally it's the Selkirk grace that's used, which is a fairly simple I have it pulled up over here. I mean, it's, some have meat and cannot eat, and some would eat that want it. But we have meat and we can eat, so let the Lord be thanked it, which is a real short, sweet, um, obviously in Scots English, and it's in, and then everybody eats. Now, how this ties in with whiskey is traditionally the toasts are made with Scotch whiskey, because it is one of the largest exports from Scotland. Believe it or not, a pretty good or surprisingly good portion of the uh, export revenue of the UK is Scotch whiskey. Um, and it's hard to nail down figures exactly because there are like the annual reports and whatnot that you can read, but they are incredibly dry and hard to get through. But it's a surprising amount of the export of the UK is Scotch whiskey, and it's not surprising when you look at you've got North British, who are one of the largest distilleries in the world, and you've got Macallan, who has an annual production of, I think, close to 5 million liters per year now, um, and that's just two huge distilleries, and there are a lot of large distilleries in Scotland. And there's a huge variety in Scotch, which goes from like Blair Athol, which is a very light, unpeated Highland malt. That's one of my favorite unpeated malts. To you have like Wrong Shoulder, Lagavulin, which is that is the Offerman Edition 11-year-old, which is heavily peated malt that is then put into charred casks, or finished in charred casks, and it is incredibly smoky. I really like it. It strangely, that Offerman edition brings to mind an American single malt. Every time I drink it, it makes me think of an American single malt. I don't know if I've told you this, Joe, but every time I pour the Offerman edition, I think of McCarthy's, because that's what it
That's
reminds me of.
that's really kind of you, man. The smoke that you get in a really well balanced peated single malts is such a defining characteristic. Nothing sets depth within a spirit like the proper use of peat. And some whiskeys have that source of smoke closer, and the intimacy is with the whiskey itself is more about defined shadows, as if campfires. I've used this metaphor before, but right behind a stand of trees, and then you get these deeper smokes, like what you've described with the Offerman edition. And that smoke and that fire being so much further away, you perceive the distance differently. But it's always defined by smoke. And for um, that's always been kind of a philosophy of when I work with Pete. It's fun because it's just this added dimension that a lot of whiskeys don't ever have.
So while we're talking about you know peat and whiskey, um, I sort of, as a primer, asked in the lodge about what people go to when they think of good quality, nice budget Scotch, because there, when you think of Scotch, you think expensive, and there is a lot of that. Um, but one of the things that I found really interesting is that when people mentioned, when we were talking about good quality, high quality, affordable, nice Scotch, nothing anybody mentioned was peated. And I I find that interesting because it really is the case that a lot of the high quality peated malts are a little more on the expensive side. And I think I would assume that comes down to the added labor of the peating of the malt, which I can't personally speak to.
Yeah, that's
Doug,
so
you
interesting. I was thinking back, when you asked that question, my first response was, I really miss my Glenfiddich 12, but I have too much scotch, so I'm not going to buy another one. That was my response to you, and I kind of didn't elaborate beyond there what I would choose. Although I did say that I had recently shared the Ugadal, which is $130, at least in the Pacific Northwest. So like that's a nice go-to available peated scotch, although it's not cheap.
No,
But completely different thing happened when I went to pick out what I was going to pour for myself this evening. And I mean, for one thing, I'm in the mood for Springbank, so I pulled out my Springbank 10, and that feels like a good fancy scotch at this point. Even though it's an entry level age, it's an entry level product from the distillery. It's hard to find, so that makes it feel fancy. And then the very next thing that I thought was I wanted to bring out my Highland Park. And
Oh,
Highland
nice
Park,
choice.
Springbank and Highland Park are both peated, lightly, albeit. I think the heavily peated stuff tends to be a lot more on the pricey side. I think what's probably the cheapest heavily peated whiskey you could get? I want to say probably Ardbeg Wee Beastie, $65.
I don't think you're gonna really beat that. Maybe a couple of bucks on sale. Also, just so you know, Doug, I also Highland Park was my pull for tonight as well.
Nice.
I have to be that guy. I went with an unpeated malt to start.
But you went with the high
Fairhill
age
21
statement.
year old.
Mm.
Yes, because this is kind of special. A friend of mine got it for me for my birthday a couple of years ago, and it's running quite low. But it's typically what I reach for when I have a special occasion because it was a gift from a friend of mine, and it is a you know a bottle from a single cask from an independent bottler, and it is fantastic. It's also 48.9%, which is a nice, approachable, but not to scoff at proof.
So I was about to explain before we went live that I actually poured myself some Miyagi Kyo last night, didn't get to drink it, put a cap on it, figured, hey, that would be a good thing to compare to Springbank because Miyagi Kyo is one of the Nika distilleries, which was one of Masataka Taketsu's projects. Except he was more Yoichi, I guess. Yoichi is the Campbelltown style that he was trying to emulate, and Miyagi Kyo is a little softer in that respect. But I still felt like it would be interesting to compare the Japanese whiskey to the Springbank. And in the comparison, I never thought Springbank was peppery before. But the very first thing I got from this on the nose was pepper, which is so interesting.
Oh, sorry.
I have the Viking Honor is one I'm sampling tonight, and that's a 12-year from Highland Park. It's very sweet, very light, and very acceptable in a lot of ways. A little bit of spice. The fruit notes are larger than your typical Highland Park, in my opinion, and all I think about it is great. It's one of the ones that I like actually putting a little bit of even though it's a 40%, I still like the exploration of having a small ice cube melt throughout the process because I do think it really changes stuff. And as much as I like tasting barrel strength, there's a lot to learn in the flavor from getting something down below proof. But it was something that was around, and I was kind of curious about it. It seemed like a good night to open it up.
Oh, is that something you can still get? For some reason, I thought that one was kind of a special release from before.
Yeah, I've had it around for a little while.
I've decided that
Dead
I'm
air.
going to spend the night drinking nice stuff. I've also
Excellent
got
choice.
a little bit of Glenmore and G Nectar Dior, which is finished in Sauterne casks, and I believe it is 10 years in ex bourbon casks and then 2 years in Sauternes casks, but I'm not sure about that. It's hard to get really good details from a lot of Scotch distillers. I don't know. Well, I have a pretty good idea of why, and some of it is a matter of tradition, and you don't reveal secrets. But I'm not sure.
I will say this: in the American distilling industry, we're pretty open book. I think it's one of the things I like most about
Mhm.
us as a culture. We're really there to help each other out, especially. Pardon me, my good glassware is packed up. I'm got like a tumbler in here.
That's all right. I find that these take up less space on my bar, so I can
Yeah,
have 3 or 4 of these.
that was definitely. That's an interesting question, right? When you go for fancy whiskey for a hang, is it Glencairns or is it something else? Because my tendency is actually to go for my cut crystal glass, not glasses, cut crystal tumblers. They're like double old fashioned glasses.
Uh-huh.
A couple of years ago, I had my parents over and we were at a bar. It was around Christmas time. We were at a bar and they saw the Offerman Yule log on the screen. And they're like, "What's the deal with that?" And I explained the whole thing. And then when we got home, I poured them Lagavulin 16 and we sat around and watched Nick Offerman with the Yule log for however long that was, half an hour, sipping our Lagavulin 16. And that felt like the right thing. Everybody had a nice old fashioned glass that felt good and hefty in the hand, matched what Nick Offerman was drinking out of more or less, and that felt like the fancier thing, right? Glencairns are tasting glasses. They take up less space on the desk. I use
Mhm.
these for sensory analysis, for writing reviews, for um, geeking out, as it were. This doesn't necessarily feel like always the right thing when you're entertaining company, and that feels more what Burns Night is about. So
Yeah,
if I had people over, it would likely be the tumblers, not the Glencairns.
Mm.
yeah.
Fair.
I think the only time I've ever done Glencairns or other nosing glasses with a group was when I was actually leading it something that was a tasting and not just sharing drinks with friends. And
I
I've
still,
go
I
ahead.
still think that there's a particular uh, added joy about having whiskey outside, like while you're doing work, out of a coffee mug. Like because the coffee mugs, it's heftier. You can kind of set it down. You don't have to worry about it, and it won't blow over. And so I've done that a few times, and I swear that's sometimes the best drinking vessel you could imagine. So I'm with you, Doug. There's kind of an execution to each one of them. I mean, I've been to your house, and I've drank out of those tumblers.
Man, making me feel jealous that I'm all the way out here.
We're gonna have you over here at some point. Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, that's I made you the smoked old fashioned
You
in
did,
that tumbler.
you
Yeah,
did,
nice. And you liked it so much that I bought a smoked old fashioned kit for the Clear Creek crew.
which was so nice, and just yeah, we had the best time.
Did that go with you, or does Caitlin have it now?
It's with me now.
Sorry, I need to get used to
I took that
saying
one with me.
Bartlemay. Nice. I need to get used
Yeah,
to saying
that.
Bartlemay because she told me she prefers Bartlemay, and I've been
Oh
saying
yeah,
Caitlin.
she
And
heavily prefers Bartlemy. I'd only call her Caitlin when I really badly wanted something out of her because I knew that it would shake her initially, and then I'd have a greater chance of getting what I needed.
it's like using someone's full name. Feels like getting
Yeah,
yelled at by your mom.
exactly.
Oh yeah. Although I do like the nickname that she's earned in the lodge now, which is Bartlemy.
Yeah, and that was so recent too. I was like, "Hey, I've got this 2-to-1 simple syrup that keeps crystallizing. What do I do?" And she went into the science of why adding invert sugar would fix it. I loved that so much.
Yeah, invert sugar is like it's one of I'm actually working with it now on a project, or at least working to formulate a project using it that I can't get into too much. But Invert's really great because all it is sugar, water, and an acid or an enzyme, and it just breaks half those sugar bonds, and you get 1.3 times the sweetness with the exact same amount of sugar, and it never crystallizes. It's the best, and it's just I mean, it's calories. You use them in liqueurs, things like that, but rather than
Mhm.
cane sugar or something like that, it's the exact same product, but it's far more stable. It has citric acid in it. There's got to be better, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, sure. I mean, lots of cocktails call for right
Yeah,
acidity, so that wouldn't hurt.
yeah.
Definitely.
No, it's not enough to taste. It's a great product though. I'm a little bit super fascinated with it.
Yeah, why are we using high fructose corn syrup when we have something that's sweeter for the same number of calories?
I have no idea. And it's all of it. So much of it is actually coming from Northwest beet sugar too. So it's all sugar beet farms in
Oh,
eastern Washington and eastern Oregon provide the majority of the um, raw materials to make inverted sugar. So to me, it's just kind of like a win-win in a lot of ways. It's a pretty cool product. And if Amalgamated Sugar can send me a check like any day now for that that little plug they just got.
we we occasionally joke that we are not sponsored, but
Yeah. And so that'd be a good example of some of the dirty secrets that American distillers don't mind talking about, but you're never going to get out of a Scotch distillery.
well, I mean, and some of it is down to like they're not allowed to share what's in a blend, for example,
Yeah.
specifically. Like they can talk about sources for the malt and the grain, but they can't say how much of what and what ages of what. Um, and the only age they can put on is the age of the youngest component, and all of that, only talk about the age of the youngest component is a consumer protection thing because it would be truly unfair to say, oh yes, we've got like a couple ounces of 21-year-old whiskey in this massive vat, um, but them not being able to like brag about some of the interesting work that they're doing
Mm.
is kind of a shame.
I don't know if I would assume it's kind of my understanding is that the difference in where they're taxed plays into it as well. So with American distilleries, you're taxed at the point of sale, but Scottish distilleries, you're taxed at the point of distillation. So I'm sure the full enforcement of just the age statement may have something to do with making sure that they're not trying to they're trying to make the sales equal that
Mhm.
tax bill that comes at the end of the year. Have you so in that same vein? Have you ever the entire distillation passes through what's known as a spirit safe,
Mhm.
and so the spirit safe is like this glass box that you can control the flow, but you can't actually access because there's a brass bar that goes through it, which is padlocked on. The only person that has the key to the padlock is the tax man. So the entirety of the time, you really can't. You really never can touch the spirit itself.
Interesting. I knew of the spirit safes, but I did not know that they were locked in that manner.
Yeah.
Interesting. I keep forgetting where I put which glass and what is in which.
Yeah, don't forget those.
So at a Burns night, can you talk about all things Scottish? I'm in O'Sullivan, but I'm from Massachusetts. I don't know much about this stuff.
Yeah, it is a celebration of Scottish culture and heritage. And for example, I've seen some posts from I think it may have been McGregor and Macduff, a kilt maker and rental specialist in the UK. I believe their offices are in Glasgow. Um, where they had a nifty chart that showed like their monthly kilt rental uh, earnings, and it suddenly spikes in January because part of the culture of burn sufferers is you wear a kilt, which isn't actually terribly common in like general practice in Scotland. So when people are going to burn suppers and they're dressing up in their kilt and Prince Charlie or kilt and Braemar, they're usually renting it, which is an interesting fun fact because I own two kilts. Well, technically three if you count the utility kilt, but I own more kilts than the average Scottishman, and I find that hilarious.
That's kind of amazing. But answering this, do you have your own dirk?
I have a couple. We are wearing.
You have a couple of dirks?
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who's ever had one. Now I know a guy that has two.
We are a little bit wary about showing steel on stream because Twitch rules are a little bit.
Oh, I think just the fact that you own them, I don't have to
Yeah.
see them. But that's amazing. I'm impressed.
I also strangely own two kukris as well, and I've got a little lump of money put aside to buy myself a basket hilt broadsword.
Wow. And here I was waiting for this to start by watching The Highlander.
I have this plan purely because I, as a joke, asked a friend of mine if I could wear a kilt and broadsword to her wedding, and she was like, "Well, my wife's friend is going to come dressed as a wizard because he lost a bet, so feel free." So I'm saving up for a good broadsword.
Nice.
Yeah, I approve, man.
We always
I
went
seriously approve.
as far as steel went. My dad was a many degree black belt in jiu-jitsu and had a katana specialty. So he had katanas that he had dulled when I was born so that there wouldn't be any accidents. But apparently they were legitimate sharp blades originally. And then at some point at a Renaissance festival, he bought a Klingon batleth replica. So that's the kind of nerdy house that we've got.
None of this surprises me, Doug, like at all. The apple is so close to the tree on this one.
I do not find it at all hard to imagine Doug, in his living room going through like the Klingon batleth, the the katas with the batleth, just because it would be a good workout. Those are heavy.
I can just see his like.
Unfortunately, all of those were lost in a flood, so there's we no longer have the batleth. I actually recently asked Dad if he was going to replace it, and I think he said maybe, but maybe look into something else to have to vary the decor.
I can see young Doug now, like his parents, putting a straight A report card with a magnet onto the weapon wall. Very proud of him.
The straight A is a weapon. It's a weapon to be used against me later.
Yeah, absolutely.
What happened?
Yeah, what happened to you?
You were doing.
You talk about whiskey for work now. What's going on?
All right, so back on the topic of Scottish things.
Mhm.
So I at said Renaissance festival that I was just speaking of. Thanks for joining, Genji. See you later.
Good night.
And by the way, before we move on too far past this, other Joe has showed up, or original Joe, depending on how he says, raise a glass, folks. Happy to oblige.
Always.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.
He's original Joe.
Original Joe, yeah, that's right. When you first joined the Discord, you named yourself Other Joe, and then I saw your screen name, and I was like, Joe DeV is an awesome screen name. Why don't you just keep that? And then you switched it back. Okay, so on the note of Scottish things, I got a genetic test done recently, and I found out I'm not Scottish. So just to put that to bed, I have the red beard. But it's not from Scotland. It's apparently from I'm a quarter-ish Irish, which we didn't really know exactly because Grandma didn't know a whole lot of her heritage. It was sort of European mix. So now I have a better idea. But on the note of things that are Scottish, my wife is going to make fun of me for standing up and showing this. I have a kilt.
Ah, it's a great kilt.
I
So
suppose
it's
I
a
should.
utility kilt with the tartan colors are it's a blue, white, and sort of dark gray or black tartan, and I forget what it's called and I can't find it now, but I was told this is something anyone can wear. So since I have no clan or affiliation and I like blue anyway, this felt appropriate, and I sort of matched my shirt to the tartan for today.
I'm going to see if I can stand up high enough for it to be visible on camera, but I too am wearing a kilt. Just barely.
Oh, also really nice colors.
This is the Edinburgh District tartan because the last place in Scotland that the Boggses were found, my maternal grandfather, his family, was in Edinburgh, although they were apparently originally from the lowlands somewhere, uh, down near the borders, which means that they had probably a wonderful reputation. Um, but it is the kilt that I wear the most. I also have Wallace because there are also Wallaces in my family tree. But interestingly, about tartans and sort of the myth of, oh, if you're not from a certain clan, you're not allowed to wear the tartan. There are only 3 tartans that are heavily controlled. One of them is the actual tartan of the royal family. I can't think of what it is off the top of my head, but I know it when I see it because you never see it. So like Royal Stewart is sort of the officially unofficial family tartan of the royal family, but anyone can wear Royal Stewart. Um, Anyone can wear Wallace, Harris, or MacLeod, but you can't wear the specific tartan of the royal family. There are some tartans that you could theoretically wear, except that they are trademarked by corporations. For example, the tartan that Walker Shortbread uses is technically copyrighted by the Walker Shortbread Company, so you can't wear that. Um, the famous advertising image of the Doors Piper, in his resplendent in his kilt and fly plaid and sash. That's the Doors Highlander tartan, and you can't get it woven, which is a shame because it's a beautiful tartan, and I would absolutely wear it. Uh, I I made a big Twitter post, I think last year or the year before, about how much I love tartans and how much I feel like Scottish distilleries don't use them, and they should, because there are a lot of restricted corporate tartans that are fantastic that nobody uses. I can't get woven, so I can't, like, for example, make a tartan in the Glenfarclas, or I can't make a kilt in the Glenfarclas tartan. But the funniest restricted tartan that nobody can weave or wear is the MacDuck tartan.
From DuckTales?
Yes. Yeah, I was wondering
Scrooge,
whether I heard you right. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Scrooge McDuck wears the MacDuck tartan, and in 1943, Walt Disney put out a line of war bond advertisements featuring that tartan and Scrooge McDuck, and they copyrighted it and they registered it. Once the tartan registry was started, they registered it with the tartan registry as a Disney owned corporate tartan, so nobody can weave it, nobody can wear it. And
Was there a
because
history? Sorry, I stepped on.
there's no history. They made it
That was
out of whole
totally
cloth.
created by Disney from the ground up.
Mhm.
It's a great tartan. That's unfortunate. It's green. If I remember right, it's like a green and yellow type thing, right?
Yeah, and
Oh, I gotta look it up.
I
Yeah, I'm looking it up now.
I want either a tie or a kilt in the MacDuck tartan because I think that it would be really funny because my screen name for the longest time has been relating to ducks.
Yeah,
How long
I've
ago
always
did
known you as related to ducks on this stuff.
yeah? Um,
Here, maybe I'll share this image real quick so that anybody who doesn't bother looking it up gets to see.
and it
Share
is in
screen
the
window.
Scottish Tartan Registry.
So there you go. And it's so perfectly on style for the cartoon.
Hmm. It's like a bunch of artists made it.
Yeah, almost.
No, I mean, okay. So this is a great. This is. I have no Scottish that I know of in my family. As far as I know, my grandparents are from Ireland and Poland, and I think I got a little English in me, most likely, but I don't know of any Scottish. And but I would say if I was, I feel like Scrooge McDuck is someone I could be proud of as a representative of
Oh yeah.
of like where my ancestors were from. And
So
he's kind of a badass.
oh yeah. I mean, who else could swim in a pool of gold coins?
That's exactly it. That would kill most ducks.
So, the notes on the tartan details on the Scottish Register of Tartans is I got the date wrong. It's 1942 and not 43. But the registration notes are Ancient McDuck, old colors as worn by Scrooge McDuck, uncle to the famous cartoon character Donald Duck, and great uncle to Huey, Dewey, and Louie, said to have been used by the U.S. government during World War II to promote the sale of war bonds. I just want a kilt in the McDuck tartan. That's all I want.
It's a fair observation question here. Which is it showing up? Yeah, they lost the copyright on Steamboat Willie this year. So how long till we get to wear that tartan? So the funny answer to that is, if I understand correctly, a lot of the copyright laws are essentially being driven by what Disney wants, and every time they can manage to get an extension, they do. And the answer to that question has been indefinitely in the future for a long time. But I think DuckTales is recent enough. I think it's like the original copyrights on Mickey and so on were like 90 years. And
Yeah.
DuckTales is from like the 80s, right? So a good long time, I think, is the answer.
This is not a comment to knock on Disney as villainous, but more ingenious in their copyright protection. The laws only extend to the images, the characters, blah blah blah. But if it's identity of the brand, is my understanding, it's something like that. The identity brand, the laws don't extend anymore, which is why they changed the logo from the mouse ears to the zoom in of Steamboat Willie a couple years ago, was to further make arguments to protect this.
I feel like I didn't realize that happened. I'm gonna have to go look now. Like that somehow went over my head, or I haven't seen anything from Disney in a while.
I've seen it a couple of times. That's it.
I'm not gonna go looking for that now. I will know what I'm looking for.
I say that
again. I watched a lot of Disney movies because I have a niece who enjoys Disney properties, as all children do. And I have to say, I feel like it was within the last 5 years that they made that change.
Yeah, as far as my understanding is, it was specifically to further protect Steamboat Willie.
Mm-hmm.
So they could, if they ever really need to get it back, they will.
Yeah.
But you know the change that I'm referring to, correct?
Yeah.
Sadly, I don't. But I'm gonna go educate myself, and I'll report back, I guess. But like, you already know.
Yeah, they changed the Disney intro.
Yeah, I just didn't. I either have never seen it somehow, or I didn't realize.
Well, just to further spoil the magic on Disney Channel, when they were drawing this with the magic pen, that was all computer. They didn't really actually draw it with a magic light pen.
No way.
No, my childhood is ruined.
That was such a fun bit on the Disney Channel, though.
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah, it was like one of the best. For any, we're really drifting from Scotland down the same rabbit hole we always do with Disney. I mean, why do we always end up talking about Disney? But the if you haven't checked out the Defunct Land YouTube, that's one of the best.
I also would like to point out that Disney copyrighted the tartan that they had designed for the primary family in Brave, as well as the tartans of the auxiliary families. So all the families in Brave that wear kilts with distinct tartans, those are all copyrighted, trademark. They're Disney property. You can't have those woven.
Just figured I'd throw that up there for fun.
Watch out.
I feel like
No,
yeah,
Disney,
if we do too much of
Disney,
that, do we get a copyright takedown?
Yeah.
Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I don't think we've said anything threatening to Disney. But going back to Burns Night and just kind of the Scottish culture, Scottish poetry. This has always been one of those things I've wanted to do since forever, was take part in one of these things. What did Joe say?
Just to clarifying, yes, they still have the trademark. They only lost the copyright.
Very good.
That's a good distinction. Thanks.
But yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've always kind of focused on is Scottish cinema, Scottish writers. There's a bunch of really good ones on there. Scottish music. I'm 45. I used to go see a lot of music, so of course I was a fan of Belle Sebastian at the time, and I think there's still a little bit of a fantasy that I have with Scotland and what they do and the culture and comes out of it. It always seems kind of neat. Like they produce a lot of high quality stuff for a lot of few people.
One of the things that's magical about Scotland is, like, there is, like everywhere else, there's the vast gulf between like city centers of Edinburgh and Glasgow, and then you drive an hour and you are in the Highlands and there's nothing for miles, and you can hike to the top of a mountain and there's nothing but like rolling farmland for as far as the eye can see. And it's sort of that weird, like, our perception of the UK is that everything is so small and tight and close together because there is no space on the island or islands. And then so much of Scotland is this vast, beautiful, open area that is, part of the like charm of Scotland. One of the major tourist draws of Scotland versus other parts of the UK is that there is so much of this beautiful, like the nature preserves, Caithness National Park in the north, that is just absolutely beautiful, and you can look at pictures of it and almost feel the cold wind. And it's of all the places I want to go, Scotland is at the top of the list. Someday.
Yeah, I could see you as kind of a natural enjoying it over there, man. I went there once in my early 20s and really liked it. The people were fantastic. I mean, I was there to see as many bands and check out a lot of music, and I found it to be a pretty amazing city. Or a country, I should say, but I specifically spent time in Edinburgh. I'm always wary to them pronouncing something wrong with UK names. If I have, it's not an offense. I'm going to be slightly bad at it no matter what.
Oh yeah, I think that's sort of normal. There is something about Scottish and place names in general that are always a little bit weird, but Scotland and Wales are by far the worst. And like there are, for example, one of my favorite distilleries that's not on Isla is Old Pulteney. That's the first time I read it, I thought it should be pronounced Old Pulteney because of the way it's written, but it's pronounced Old Pulteney. Pulteney, and that en is just squished to just the n sound.
So looking through a list of Scottish bands, I didn't realize there's a couple of ones that just truly shaped my music appreciation from a young age. I was like, I had no idea. I didn't know that Mogwai was Scottish. I had no idea. The Jesus and Mary Chain, though, that blew my mind. Scottish band right there. That defined the entire category of shoegaze rock. Scottish import.
Did you say Mogwai is Scottish?
That's what it said. That's what I saw online. Mogwai, Scottish.
Oh,
Okay.
And
So maybe I was thinking you meant the word, because I mean, and maybe because like there are coincidences like that from time to time. But I was thinking of the Gremlins, the Mogwai,
oh,
the right, the Chinese, the Cantonese name for the
for
little
monster.
creature. Yeah. Which means monster or something like ghost or something in Cantonese.
Yeah, I think that I'm
Or
pretty
demon.
Sure
Demon, I think is what
the
it was.
band took the name from the movie. It's a good word.
there's also like it's sort of a weird deep end sort of discussion, but there are also a lot of bands that sort of defined the rock and metal scene early in the well, mid to late 60s into the early 70s that aren't terribly well known, but if you listen to them and then you listen to some of the like Northern English and Scottish rock and metal bands in the succeeding years, you can definitely hear the influences of bands like Iron Claw,
Mm-hmm.
where it's you know makes you wonder if there is something inherently Scottish about that sound. Something about the syncopation in drums.
Yeah, there's it's pretty percussive, and I don't mean that necessarily just about the drums, but there's a march to the music. It seems very front loaded with its energy. It's always pushing the song forward rather than some music seems to always slide it back a little bit. I can definitely hear that.
I've switched up again because I've just sort of wandering around unpeated selections now. I'm enjoying a bit of Comintoll, which is one of the smaller distilleries.
I really like that distillery though. They're one of
Oh yeah,
my. There's something so thoughtful about their whiskey that I think is really nice.
Yeah, you guys have probably been following my sort of review efforts and so on, so you guys probably
Oh,
know, but the
yeah.
audience may not. For the last 2 or 3 months, I have pretty much only been drinking American single malt and non-alcoholic things because dry January and doing reviews of that kind of thing. So this is the first time I've come back to Scotch for quite a while, other than what I ended up tasting incidentally while sharing some Scotch with other people. So as for me, myself, sitting down and having Scotch, and funny enough, I ended up drinking Japanese whiskey more often on the side of American single malt as a comparison for some strange reason. So like the two things that I've been drinking that were alcoholic were American single malt and Japanese whiskey. So like I have all this Scotch that I haven't been touching in these cabinets for quite a while now, and it was fun kind of walking through and finding the stuff that I thought would be really cool to drink tonight. So a little while ago, I poured myself the Highland Park Dark Origins, which, and then I sort of stared at the bottle, going like, "What kind of sherry was that?" This doesn't actually say, as far as I can tell. Double first fill sherry casks is what it says. I would not, I would not be surprised if it was mostly Oloroso. But something about it, I kind of poured it, and then I was like, "Oh, that's really dusty," and I set it aside. And it's only just now waking up as like as like having a sherry nose to it, and it's very sherry bomb ish for a Highland Park. That's kind of surprising. I was
Yeah,
hoping to go more and more peat throughout the day, but I almost feel like I want to go grab a proper sherry bomb now and see. Does the Benromic? One of the things that I was going to pour before I went to heavy peat was the Benromic 10 Imperial Proof, which is 57% alcohol, and I don't know if this counts as a sherry bomb.
I should switch to peat on my next one.
I'm going
Sorry,
to have to head out in a few minutes, only because I have some more work to do today. But I did want to say that I remember as it coming into this industry and loving what I did and thinking that Steve McCarthy was the coolest guy ever, and he was.
Cheers, Steve.
Cheers to Steve. But I also it was kind of from his in distillery spirits collection that I truly found inspiration, and it was an older bottle of Bowmore that he had around for just a million years that I remember. I don't know if I was supposed to try it. I don't know if I was supposed to sample it or not. Like I have no idea, but it was there. And I was so interested in like what this was because it came in a fancy box and it was packaged real nice, and it looks so rare and so interesting and so kind of like it was a moment of time travel. There was something from that you could tell reached into the past, and so I remember trying it. And again, I didn't ask permission. I may not have been supposed to, but it was Steve's, and I love you up there, Steve. Yeah, I really do. But I probably poached a little bit of his booze. But it really blew my mind, and it was the first time I tried sherry. It was a Bowmore, and it was the first time that I really remember understanding that there could be endless depth to whiskey. And I love all sorts of whiskey. I love rye. I love bourbon. I love weeded whiskey. You name it. There's brilliant things that are being done that go back to tradition and culture and love, right? You know, I'm never going to take any sort of negative opinion on anything that Jimmy Russell's ever made. That man's a genius. That being said, I wonder if he would. I would love to drink scotch with him someday, because to me, trying that Bowmore back in the day really was what inspired me to become a distiller and to stick with it. And it was just this incredible honey-like quality, this deep sherry finish that was part of it. And I grabbed somebody else. That somebody else is still in the industry too. We work together. It's not Caitlin. There was a guy named Nick Phelps. Nick's an amazing brewer, works in now a different end of it, often to do with recycling and greenifying the industry. Really cool guy. And I grabbed him. I was like, I don't know if we're supposed to try this, but you got to try this. And I wonder if he still remembers that, because it was, to me, still one of the best whiskeys I've ever had in my life. And so, before I go, I will thank Scotland and Scotch in general and Scottish distillers for keeping me for bringing me to the place where I realized I belong in this industry, because I've always looked back to Scotland when designing products, especially whiskey. There's just a greater richness to what they can offer that I don't think I've ever quite found in the same way everywhere else. And again, rye, I think rye is incredible. It's beautiful, and there's some amazing ryes out there. Same with bourbon, same with weeded. But Scotch taught me something right away. I think it just spoke the same language as me.
Yep.
So before I head out, because I got to run, cheers. Cheers
to Scotland.
To Scotland. Happy Burns Night, gents. And thanks for having me on. I really do look forward to being on and telling you everything I'm up to, because what we're doing here in Minden Mill is, I think it's really got a lot of heart, and I want to share it with you guys.
Can't wait. And I'm so glad that we didn't have to wait until you could talk about it to have you on again.
I know. I've been holding off, but like, I don't know. I couldn't pass this up. I really wanted to see you guys.
Yep.
There.
Oh,
Cheers,
and
y'all.
and Pod Guy says, "Here's to us." I think this is a good place to end stream for the night as well.
Yeah.
So once again, I posted links to the invite to the Whiskey Lodge Discord in the chat. We'll post it in the video notes as well. So here's to Scotland once again, and cheers, Steve. And until next time, we'll see you in the lodge.
See you in lunch.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.